Thank you all for that. Well, friends, my name is Pastor Alex, if you don't know me, and I mainly serve over at Covenant, and every now and then I come over to Grace, help out in the capacity I can, and I do feel underqualified today because we're on a sermon series about grace, and I don't know if you've seen the big sign on your building, but that's you all. I'm not the grace guy. I'm the covenant guy. You want to talk about promises? Cool. But grace, I'm really bad at. Because here's what I learned today, right? The thing about grace is if there's grace for me, then that means there's grace for you, and there's grace for all of us. Whew. I don't know if I like that. Grace has been described as the worst, best news ever. The worst, best news ever. Because grace is great when it's given to me, but I find myself struggling to need to give it to others. And I, in fact, do need to give it to others. Peter reminds us today that our life in Christ calls us to holy living. And holy living isn't the status quo. To be holy means to be set apart. And Peter wants ourselves to be set apart in our actions, set apart in our judgments, to be holy as God is holy, and God's grace is holy. It's unmerited favor. And that's not easy, because our world makes me so full of rage. And you know what's a great vehicle for that rage? Technology. There's a podcast where the podcasters, they decided to post a neutral statement on Facebook. And they were going to see the responses. And the neutral statement was, spinach is green. Okay? In the comments, a little bit in jest, but picking on something that often arises, the comments would say, well, I'm colorblind, so it looks like you need to be more inclusive next time. Or, your silence on peas is really telling. And it's a joke that reflects online spaces. Take, for instance, this weekend, one of my friends who's a trauma therapist in the queer community here in Colorado. They told me about a closing of the bar called The Pearl and how their clients brought it up to them a lot this week. And The Pearl is a lesbian bar, this place for this queer community to gather, and it went under due to really poor management, and it's a place that brought tons of joy and life to people who needed community and love. And in an effort to save the bar, a GoFundMe was published, and they raised, get this, $83,000. The community showed up to save a place. They gave them safety, comfort, and community. And my friends had a lot of clients who donated to this GoFundMe. And sure enough, as online discourse started happening about the Pearl and the GoFundMe, people who didn't know each other or people who were in the same community started to judge one another. Rage started happening. My friends' clients would post about donating to the GoFundMe, and people online would respond with, "You donated to the GoFundMe? Do you know that people in Palestine could really use your money right now?" Or really insert any virtue you want to signal. But sure enough, the conversation no longer came about the bar, but about judgment, anger, and rage. And more rage led to less grace for one another, which led to more rage. And this feels all too familiar when it comes to technology. And that's because rage on the internet is by design. Something sociologically happens to us when we encounter people anonymously across a screen rather than in person. we're more inclined to be ruder or encounter someone who with less grace than we normally give. But on top of that, and maybe learned by that, rage is the tool of technology to make money. If you're angry about a lot of things, you're right. There's a lot of things to be angry about. But you should also know you're most likely being manipulated. A lot of tech companies that run our world aren't racing for your best interests at heart. They're in a race for your attention. Tech companies, the news, streaming services make money by keeping your attention. That's how they make money. If the content is good enough, you'll buy a subscription, but also they sell your attention to advertisements. And they're really, really good at it, especially on social media, because they have tools that normal advertisements don't have, like artificial intelligence. No other media draws on massive supercomputers to predict what I could show to perfectly keep you scrolling, swiping, and sharing. 24/7 influence. No other media steers 2 billion people's thoughts 24/7, spending over 150 minutes on social media a day from the moment we wake up to the moment we fall asleep. Social control. No other media redefines the terms of our social lives, self-esteem, what we believe we're missing out on, the perception that others agree with us, and personalization. No other media uses precise, personalized profile of everything we've shared, clicked, said, and watched to influence our behavior at this scale. Tristan Harris, he's the co-founder for the Center for Humane Technology, and he says this: tech's race for attention leads to a race to the bottom of the brainstem, exploiting psychology for engagement, not well-being. Did you know that Netflix's CEO said their biggest competitor isn't Amazon or HBO? It's your need to sleep. In a race to the bottom of the brainstem, a huge tool that tech uses to keep your attention is outrage. Outrage keeps our attention. Lucas Bennett is a journalist in Australia, and he wrote this: anger keeps us scrolling, fear fuels clicks, and tribalism generates comments. Platforms begin serving more of what sparked reaction and less of what encouraged reflection. Nuance? Too slow. Dialogue? Too civil. Instead, we're offered a steady stream of content designed to provoke. A tweet, a meme, a headline, out of context, emotionally charged, ready to divide. In grace, here's the thing: it doesn't matter if our outrage is fabricated, or destroying our ability socially to have civil conversations, or hurting our democracy, or taking away our agency. As long as you're engaged, as long as they have your attention, they make money. I'm not good at grace. Grace is so difficult, especially when rage is being manufactured around me. And again, don't get me wrong, there's a lot to be angry about. In grace, there's a lot of reasons to easily help me demonize my neighbor. And grace is so difficult because first Peter asks us to be set apart, to live like Jesus lived. And Jesus, looking down from the cross, being crucified by people, said, "Forgive them, God, for they know not what they do." Gracious. I feel similar rage to Jonah when he reveals why he's so mad at God in chapter 4. Jonah says this. He said, "Oh God, you want to know why I stalled fleeing to Tarshish?" He said, I I knew that you were gracious and compassionate God. You're slow to anger and abounding in love. A God who relents from sending calamity. Just send it. Send the calamity. Send the calamity on the people across the screen from me. Or the people in the news I'm not in relationship with or spend time with. And Jesus sets a grace that is fully set apart. A grace that is holy. And I'm not good at being gracious with others. Oftentimes, I'm not even gracious with myself. But if I want to be set apart, here are two things that incline me towards that. Number one is to move inward and not outward. One unfair or unconnected judgments on others cause us to be ungracious. One thing to help me offer grace in my judgments is to turn them inward. How am I doing at the thing I'm judging someone else for? Have I evaluated the speck in my own eye before calling out the log in someone else's? Sometimes grace is just giving other people the space to not be me. And it's turning my judgments inward before I cast them outward. And number two, be a peacemaker and not a peacekeeper. I believe in a gracious God, but I also believe in a just God. The problem with cheap grace is that it holds too many hands and not enough accountability. Where we can get grace wrong is that grace isn't about rolling over. The difference between a peacekeeper and a peacemaker is a peacekeeper wants to keep the status quo. What's the quickest way to get me watching Netflix and not dealing with whatever conflict I have? A peacekeeper confuses peace as the absence of conflict. They'll pass their unwillingness to confront anything as grace. Whereas a peacemaker knows that for true peace to be here, conflict is necessary. Conflict done correctly creates intimacy and connection. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Grace is the worst, best news ever. Because I'm so excited for God to have grace with me. But I have no patience that God could have grace with someone else beside me. In order for me to live as holy as Peter wants me to, I might need to extend grace to others more than once. It might need to be grace upon grace.